Life's too short to drive boring cars. Hey, you look around, you see some great, phenomenal BMWs on the used car market. 3, 4, 5 years of age, and you can get them for as little as 50 or 60% of their original value. What's not to like when those cars are so expensive brand new? After all, they're your ultimate driving machine. But guess what? I'm here to share with you 10 reasons why you probably don't want to buy a used BMW unless you're a do-it-yourself mechanic, you have a huge bankroll, or you have a certified pre-owned warranty. Let's get into it now. So the first reason why you wouldn't necessarily buy one of these vehicles used is because of the utter depreciation or the loss in value. Now sure, it seems very compelling. After all, you see a 5-year-old vehicle and it's worth less than half of its original pricing. Seems like a great thing to get into. You look at an X5M like this as an example, and these vehicles are in excess of $100,000 Canadian. They're absolutely beautiful, they go fast, and are true to the motto, ultimate driving machine. However, just about everybody I know is always worried about retirement, savings, putting money away, 401k, all of your benefits to make sure you have money when you get old. But then you spend 100 grand and 5 years later that vehicle's only worth 30. So where did the rest of that 70 grand go? Poof, up in smoke, that's right. So I've said this in previous videos, the 2 to 3 year of age mark is the sweet spot, and that still does hold true. And for those that need to have one of these vehicles, that is in fact where you want to buy into one. However, know this, regardless of where you buy into that vehicle, it still continues that downhill slide. So if you're worried about your money, don't buy a used BMW. So the second reason why you wouldn't buy one of these used BMWs is for the simple fact that they require specialized training for those technicians who walk around in the fancy jumpsuits. They also need specialized tools and specialized equipment just to properly diagnose some of the problems you can get with some of these vehicles. Now, while there's some great apps like Carly and there's a lot of great aftermarket information, there's a lot of tuning availability, and of course there's a lot of general information that helps to do-it-yourselfer troubleshoot some of these problems. The fact of the matter is, even if you're a do-it-yourselfer, there are certain limits. There's things you can do. For example, most do-it-yourselfers can do their own brake jobs, change their own lights when they burn out, do an oil service themselves, rotate their own tires, and a lot of other general maintenance as well. But the problem is, when there's anything that goes wrong with sensors and electronics, often you're stuck taking this vehicle into the dealer, otherwise you won't be able to fix it yourself. So the next reason why you don't really want to buy one of these vehicles outside of warranty is because of the extravagant cost for maintenance and repairs outside of warranty. Yes, look at this as a prime example. Here we have an X5M. Absolutely great to drive. There's almost nothing better. As a matter of fact, bang for buck, Lamborghini Urus, this holds its own. It is a great and amazing vehicle. However, outside of the warranty, once things start to break and fail, there will be costs associated with it. For example, a lot of the twin-turbo V8 engines wrapped underneath, whether it be the N63 or in this case we have the S63 engine, a lot of times what it means is they've got 2 turbos in the V of the engine, and those 2 turbos start to cook away and it causes premature oil consumption because it roasts the heads and the valve guide seals. Causes problems for the engine long term. Unfortunately, by the time you figure out that it's a problem through heavy oil consumption and having to rebuild an engine, it's usually 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the road. Just when you think you're getting a deal buying that 5-year-old BMW X5M, you can find yourself stuck with a huge top-end engine repair bill. We won't even talk about the turbos because the turbos themselves overheat because they're tucked in there and they're like little warm little piggies wrapped in a blanket, and as a result they cook themselves as well. So turbos and the heads of the engine can become a very expensive repair. And other things that creep in, if you're talking about a turbo 6-cylinder engine, maybe not so much the current B58, but certainly anything N54 and older, a lot of times cooling system is an issue. Cooling system always seems to fail at that 80 to 120,000 kilometer range, where you're having to do radiators, you're having to do tubing and piping, you're also having to do thermostats and water pumps, and they do fail. That's where it starts to get expensive. Lo and behold, outside of warranty. Yes, that's where it gets very, very expensive. We won't even talk about the older cars like an E60 M5 with the glorious V10 or any of those specialty M cars that have historical rod bearing problems or Vanos issues, but those are truly in fact a possibility. And as a result, out of warranty repairs in the BMW world generally don't come in the form of $100 increments. They're more likely in the $1,000 increments. Every time something needs a repair and you need to take it to the dealer, remember, it's a premium luxury car. And just because you get that car for $8,000 doesn't mean the repairs are in line with that. No, the repairs are actually in line with the fact that that car costs $80,000 brand new. So the next reason why you don't necessarily want to buy one of these vehicles used is parts availability. Now granted, BMW is actually really good. They do have a pretty widespread dealer network, so any large centers you can often get parts in fairly short order. But even me living in a large city, there's been often cases where I've had to order specialty parts for my BMWs, and almost never is that part available in the city on the counter. Usually got to order it in. It usually takes a day or a couple days to get it in, but the point of the matter is parts become a little bit more difficult to get. We won't even talk about some of the specialty things. Those are just maintenance items. What about parts, for example, like, what if you cracked a fender panel like that? Where are you going to get that? What about the turbo under the hood? That will be specialty for sure. And LED headlights, that's a special order, guaranteed. So really, at the end of the day, parts are available, but they usually mean you got to wait a little while. And the other factor to consider is if you live in a small rural community, say out in the country somewhere, maybe on an acreage or on a farm, and maybe you're 2.5 hours out of a near major center, you're guaranteed to gonna have problems to find parts. You won't find anything in the nearest Canadian Tire or Napa store. You're gonna have to make a big trip to the big city and possibly even wait for a couple more days above and beyond that. So getting parts and servicing is going to be very difficult for your BMW if you're in a smaller community. So the next reason why you probably don't want to buy a used BMW like this one, for example, has to do with maintenance costs. I know that seems like such a cliche discussion, but I'll give you some examples. Looking at an X5 back here, I have one very similar to this, but again, I bought these vehicles way before I knew anything about them. Maintenance. Oil changes, at least on the Canadian side of the border, cost me $250 at the dealer unless I decide to do it myself. Those tires on most BMWs today are run flats. Run flats typically cost 2 to 2.5 times what a standard tire costs. And as a result, especially if you're driving an all-wheel drive X5 like this, for example, if you get a nail, most tire shops are not authorized, and neither will a BMW shop authorize to repair that tire. In other words, they'll tell you that no, we'll only have to replace it. But you just can't change one corner. You have to change the other front, and because it's all-wheel drive, and if you have so much more wear, say you're down to about 50% or 60%, you actually have to change all 4 of your wheels. And that becomes a massive expense if you take on one nail. It's ridiculous. Now, yes, I've found workarounds or small shops, scabby little shops that will do it for you, but it's not something that the dealer will ever support. Not only that, how about a battery change? The batteries on these are at the back of the vehicle, and for the most part, not overly difficult to change. However, there's another factor. They have to be the authorized BMW batteries, and BMW actually has to code that battery. So in other words, they're going to charge you a little extra labor to actually code that battery and install it, and it becomes a $500 venture just to put in a battery. That's kind of ridiculous. And on top of that, a lot of these vehicles, did you know, for them to ride nicely and properly, they actually use air ride suspension, like in this X5. So when these air ride suspension fails, there's a couple of airbags in here. And when they finally let go, this drops down and you'll find one corner of the vehicle settling right down. Those are wear items. They're actually rubberized type bags and they sit there and float. It's sort of a self-leveling system. It's beautiful when it works. But trust me when I say if you go with the factory bags, it costs you a fortune. It could cost you as much as a couple grand to get that retrofitted if you do it at the dealer. And another thing, you want another pounding with maintenance? Right here, when you check it into service, what ends up happening is if you have a check engine light with your BMW, these guys in most cases will not do it free of charge. Okay, fine, you don't expect anybody to do anything free of charge these days, but you'd think a large conglomerate of BMW dealership networks can support that. Bring it in. It's called goodwill. Yeah, goodwill. Let the person come in, do a free scan, give them a free diagnosis. But no, $250 just to get my car through that threshold to say we're going to plug it in. And they'll ask you on the front end, they'll say, you know, there's an applicable $250 diagnostic fee. 9 times out of 10, my generic $20 code reader tells me everything I need to know, so I already know what the issue is going into it. So that's where BMW maintenance and repairs can get very, very expensive. So the next reason why you don't necessarily want to buy these vehicles used is if you can't tolerate the heat, because repairs do come. These vehicles are very, very complex and in many cases over-engineered. As a result of that, you're going to see additional expenses along the way. For example, many X5s, for example, have air ride suspension, as I already mentioned, on the rears. That's very complicated. Now, for these vehicles to handle as well as they do to the twisties, the front suspensions and the engineering behind everything. The suspension systems are very complex to give you the compliant ride, but also to give you the performance driving experience as you'd expect out of the M versions. So you're going to have very expensive repairs when parts get either damaged or worn out. Also, and you need brakes as big as a Lexus rim? You do if you're driving an X5M. So you're dealing with complexity and over-engineering and a lot of additional expenses. Let's not forget all of the electronics tied into that. You've got relays switching, relays switching, relays. How about another problem I spoke of earlier as well? I already mentioned this already too. You've got the hot V there, where you've got the two turbos roasting in the V of the engine, cooks the engine. So A, it becomes expensive to repair, and B, it's the engineering factor that does cause that. Why? Because they put the turbos in the V essentially to reduce the amount of turbo lag to improve driving dynamics. Get rid of turbo lag, it spools up faster, the car is quicker, faster, drives better. But in doing that, you've created other problems. Example, heat in the engine that you don't really want to have. So the ultimate objective for BMW is to create a car that's very efficient, performs well, and is great on fuel, and does all the things that you hope and expect it to do. But in doing so, everything's packaged in a very complex way that does get very pricey to repair. You want another one? Well, I'll give you another reason why you shouldn't buy one if you're worried about expenses for sure and you're outside of warranty, and it's the brand specific parts that are available for these cars. Now, of course, any manufacturer is going to say use only OEM parts. That's a given. But BMW and the Benzes and Audis, they take that to a new level. For example, I'll show you. Sure, if you break that mirror off, that's going to be a factory OEM part. Sure, how about a door handle? That comes off, you're going to have to pay through the nose for that. Even oil change parts and many other components under the hood often should have the OEM parts. Although there is already a pretty substantial aftermarket support network, like pollen filters and a lot of other filtration systems are available now on the cheap market. There are, in fact, there's a lot of parts you just can't go down and get a jobber part from Canadian Tire or some other place like that. For example, like lights on the front or on the back. And sometimes, even though these are LEDs, some of the older generation cars, you still could not get a bulb from your jobber stores. So unfortunately it becomes a real cat and mouse, and you ultimately wind up finding a great aftermarket place for some of your filters, or you just go to the dealer and pay the piper, because that's usually what you're going to wind up doing anyhow, because of the limited amount of aftermarket support. So the next reason why you don't necessarily want to buy these used is the high cost of tech repairs. Of course, a lot of these now with iDrive infotainment systems, you've got all the lane departure and sensors. A lot of these systems now go through modules upon modules, and how do you even troubleshoot, or where do you even begin to troubleshoot that? Now the technicians wearing those fancy jumpsuits actually have to take their training to a whole new level. They have to go to Germany or sit down in front of a computer and learn and learn and learn and learn some more about all of the latest technology. And technology is changing every single year. Just turn the page on the news and you can see between hybrid systems, pure electric, the latest infotainment system that's 22.5 inches big, and as well as the latest safety nannies, means all of this new technology is so more complex that it takes a rocket scientist who just previously trained Einstein to actually repair your BMW. So the ninth reason why you may not actually buy a used BMW is because there may actually be more reliable options than what you have here. Now, some people buy BMW because the brand, they love the car, the way it looks, the way it performs. I don't blame you. I've driven numerous BMWs and I still currently own a couple myself, so I get it. However, for those people and for those consumers who are truly concerned with reliability, BMW isn't necessarily the first place to go. I'll show you, there's great alternatives such as this. You've got a Lexus IS here. These are absolutely beautiful vehicles. Yes, great alternative to BMW. Sure, you get all the big vents and the scoops and the fancy gunmetal rims. You also get very cool styling accents on the mirrors, soft touch handles, sunroofs, cool LED lights, all-wheel drive system as well. And they've got the F Sport, similar to the M in the BMW world. They also have dual exhaust systems too, like many BMWs. But vehicles like Lexus and Acura may be more reliable luxury cars that might hit your budget. Yes, maybe they don't have quite the full driving dynamics that you'll find in a BMW, but you'll definitely drive down the road in a lap of luxury and not worry about breaking the bank. And the 10th reason might be just buying yourself a more affordable car. That's right, here we have a Honda Civic. Okay, maybe not everybody wants to drive around in a Honda. Maybe you still want the luxury. Okay, how about Genesis? That's an up-and-comer that has a great track record of reliability and isn't quite as expensive as your garden variety BMW. There's also some great competitively priced Acuras, as well as Lexus IS series, as I just showed you, can be relatively affordably priced as well. So ultimately, for the budget-savvy buyer, there's lots of other choices on the market. But with all of that said, if you're a buyer like me, I love the brand because they bring a driving dynamic that you really can't find in too many other cars out there. So for me, I do tolerate some of the ups and downs with these brands. But just be prepared to pay out of your pocketbook if you don't have an extended warranty, you're not a do-it-yourselfer. Otherwise, the BMW brand is best left for those who can tolerate the additional expense. And with all of that said, I'm sure you probably want to try to understand a little bit more about BMW's most unreliable engine. Check out that video, it's really going to share the whole story about it. Hope to see you guys on the flip side. Catch you then. Bye-bye.